Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my final thoughts as I suppose I head into the Rise of Skywalker. I have my ticket booked for tomorrow, so expect some sort of a video covering my initial thoughts on Rise of Skywalker tomorrow. But for now, let's do kind of how I'm feeling going in, any kind of final things I just want to get out there beforehand, because it's an interesting thing, like last time, to talk about the Skywalker Saga before it ends. So obviously there's been like leaks and stuff like that all over the place. I haven't been I've tried to stay away from obviously stuff since obviously like press have seen the movie and a lot of the stuff that seemingly is confirmed, a lot of the rumors. So I only really am familiar with some of the rumors from like a few months ago. But anyway, the main feeling going into this is that, look, I'm still excited to a degree because like I'm a Star Wars fan. It's a Star Wars movie. There's always going to be to some degree an excitement because of that. Because it is this kind of finale thing for the sequel trilogy, but also the overall saga. There's also that just excitement level, but there's also like this undercurrent of just kind of dread in it as well, in that I do not have that much confidence that they're going to be able to do this in the way that they need to do this and have it work. I think this movie, right now, my prediction based on the little bits and pieces that I know, is that this movie is going to be this just chaotic mess, trying to fit like episodes worth of plot into one movie, and I don't know how that's going to work. I think it's going to be a very different film than Force Awakens or Last Jedi, and I don't know if that means it's going to be better or worse. I think at the very least it means it's probably going to be an eventful movie, in that I definitely think a lot of just stuff is going to happen. Whether or not that stuff is good, or it's just like them going absolutely crazy, just introducing stuff to make stuff happen, to make the plot work, to somehow tie everything in together. I'm not sure, but like it's going to be something along those lines. It sort of has to be in so many ways. I think my main kind of like thing that I want from this movie is, if you like, Disney did this to themselves. They did not have to, in marketing episode 9, overly get across the idea that this is the end of the Skywalker Saga. That's something they did themselves. Like they could have left it open to do more, but they're specifically saying 9 is the end. And because of that, there's so much pressure now on it to link into everything. And because of that, I think this movie has to include Anakin Skywalker. It has to include Hayden Christensen. And I know he's been somewhere in this movie, he was involved and did stuff. And I hope that they did it well. Because how can you end the Skywalker Saga without the character who is like the chosen one, the core, in a way, of the first 6 movies? I think it's just this impossibility that you make this movie and don't feature Anakin in some sort of a role. And it's not good enough to just do a cameo. You can't just have like Anakin say something or just appear for a second and just say something pretty vague. You have to acknowledge that, in so many ways, like Star Wars in so many ways is about Anakin. From episode 1 to 6, it's that journey. Like Luke isn't the chosen one, it's Anakin. It's Vader who ends up being the chosen one. And everything about the sequel trilogy, especially 9, is about kind of saying, oh yeah, what you thought was the case in episode 6 isn't actually the case. So you have to bring back, I think, Anakin and allow him to sort of be the chosen one again. I'm going to be very, very disappointed if they just, hand the chosen one title over to Rey and just take that away from Anakin. You've already done a wonderful job at messing up Luke Skywalker as a character. I would hate for them to take that away from Anakin Vader. And I'd be really thinking that I think you can almost have to have like something pretty decently plot related with Anakin, in that like in some sort of a final confrontation. Inevitably, of course, we know it's going to be Palpatine versus like Rey and Kylo in some way. I don't think you can just simply end that with just Rey and Kylo together beat the Emperor, or Rey on her own beats the Emperor. I think you need Anakin to come in and somehow be the one who finishes the job and fulfills completely that role as the chosen one. And this is where I really would be thinking, like, okay, you have to give Rey her hero moment. That's just the way it is. That's what this trilogy is about. I'm not denying that. I think it would be silly to, after 7 and 8, just have Rey not really be up to much in this one. So yes, you have to give Rey her big hero moment. And I'd be very much along the lines of, I don't know what way they're going to explain Palpatine, but if it is some sort of a weird thing where, like, his spirit is kept alive in some way, which somehow managed to keep his body alive, so he's just this, like, husk of a being, I'd be all for, like, okay, Rey and Kylo somehow managed to defeat the sort of physical aspect of Palpatine, but what ends up having to properly finish him off, to, like, defeat the spirit of Palpatine, which is the thing that he came back from the last time, that's where Force Ghost Anakin comes in. Yoda in Episode 8 already revealed to us that the Force Ghosts have powers beyond just kind of communication. So I'd be very much like, you give Hayden Christensen as Force Ghost Anakin that opportunity to defeat the spirit of Palpatine. That way you give Rey, as part of this trilogy, that moment, but you also come back to Anakin and make it worthwhile. It's going to be interesting to see what they do, because if they don't have Anakin, I think this movie has just been a kind of almost like a complete failure, just on that one note of, like, how can you watch Star Wars and not realize that there is a requirement to include Anakin in this if you are dealing with balance of the Force and the character who puts the Force out of balance, in Palpatine. You have to do that. So that's probably just the one biggest thing that's borderline like a requirement for me. The other requirement is similar to that, and that is just that, like, you have to do something with Luke. I hope that there's a good scene with Luke somewhere in this movie. Again, I don't think it's good enough to just have him appear for like a few seconds as Force Ghost Luke and just say something real quickly. I hope they include him a good bit in this movie and give, it's to some extent try to justify what you did in Episode 8 with him by, giving him some characterization here. I want to see cameos. Like, this movie is going to have cameos. That's, I think, going to be the one thing that really links everything together. And so, yeah, I want to see Ewan McGregor as, Force Ghost Obi-Wan. Absolutely. I'd like to see Yoda again. I'd like to hear Qui-Gon's voice. Those type of things, absolutely, I do want to hear. I just, want them to be used in a way that is not just, tick box, okay, this Force Ghost is in here, this Force Ghost is in here. Like, I think it's important for a plot character reason to have some of them there, because it is the last one, but you need to actually do something that justifies them being there beyond just, it's kind of a requirement. So there's pressure on them with those moments, but I think they absolutely need to do it. And it could lead to just this, like, absolutely silly style action sequence at the end, in that if you have this, like, mess of Force Ghost characters, we're dealing with, like, essence transfer stuff with, like, Palpatine with, like, Sith powers and stuff like that. It could be pretty crazy. And I think, it's going to be like, okay, fine, like, it's the end of the trilogy, like, they've already teased in a way they're doing some pretty crazy stuff with Force powers. That's going to have to be the way it is, but they have to get it right. It has to work. When it comes to the other characters, one of the things I'm sort of worried about with this movie is that there are all these other new characters that they look like they're introducing here who don't really seem obviously important, like Janna, Zori Bliss. We've seen, like, Funko Pops for some of these characters and so on. The new droid, I forget the name of it, but it looks like kind of looks like the Pixar kind of thing. It's like a lamp kind of for a head. That droid is going to be in the movie. And then, like, you're reintroducing, like, Lando. I think we know Wedge is going to be in the movie. That sort of stuff. I'm just worried that, like, this movie is just going to be so hit every note that it's not going to have a core to it. It's just going to be plot, kind of fan service moment, that it's just not going to have the ultimate core that makes it work. And it's weird because I went into the cinema back in 2005 to watch Revenge of the Sith. At the time, the last Star Wars movie, the sixth of six movies in terms of the way they were released. And I had complete faith. It was probably the most hyped I've ever been as a Star Wars fan. And that movie absolutely delivered everything I wanted from a movie. It's just it was an amazing experience that they got it right, the build-up was fantastic, and I came out of it extremely happy. I'm going into the end of the Skywalker Saga. The one they're really hitting home is the end of 9 movies, that we're taking a break, that we could potentially never come back to some of this stuff. And I just feel like, please don't ruin Star Wars with this movie. Like, that's the way I feel, in that, like, look, Last Jedi has some pretty bad moments in it. It's overall not a very good Star Wars movie overall. But it's still, as I said when I reviewed it yesterday, it's still watchable. There's still some decent stuff in it. But it does begin that process of, like, they've done some pretty bad stuff here that makes Star Wars not work as well. This movie could push that completely over the edge, and it's amazing that in just a handful of years, Disney have managed to, with this trilogy, just go down, down, down. And it doesn't look like this is potentially going to be the thing that really fixes that. And I'm wondering, will we see a true shift in the aftermath of this movie to maybe movies aren't really what Star Wars is about in this kind of modern age, that the TV show format is probably where they need to go, and that could actually be the best path overall for everything. Just a high budget, TV series style thing could be exactly what Star Wars needs. That's why The Mandalorian's been doing so well, with the creativity on display in that, while also being kind of the right type of referential. And then the Obi-Wan series has a ton of hype behind it. That's going to be very interesting to see how exactly they execute that. And there's hype behind it because Ewan McGregor, I think everyone loves Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan, so there's excitement there. Cassian Andor show is kind of like, does anyone care about Cassian Andor? Maybe, because it'll be sort of rebel focused, and if they do it in the same style as The Mandalorian, it could be very sort of gritty in that way, and it could have a little bit of that kind of Clone Wars, we're really seeing the tragedy of war type stuff going on here. And then, Clone Wars Season 7, like I'd like to see more Clone Wars style stuff, but depending on it does look like what we're getting in Season 7 probably will be the ultimate finale of things. But you'd always want to be like, can we maybe get some of the other stuff animated? Like the Ventress Quinlan Voss, the Dark Disciple book, was meant to be episodes. I'd love to see those ones animated. And if Season 7 is a huge success, I'd be all for going back and just doing them if you absolutely have to. I know the story's already out there, but I'd be completely on board with that. The same with sort of Maul. I don't think he got his last arc in the actual show. I think it was a comic book that did the last bit for him in terms of Clone Wars content, so there's always that. And then you probably look towards stuff like, when are we going to get the next step of like Ahsoka, Ezra, Sabine's story that ended Rebels? That seems like a really kind of clear-cut thing, in that what's become very obvious over the last few years is that Ahsoka is a super fan favorite character, and so you want the next stage of her story to be done correctly. I suppose coming back to Rise of Skywalker, I'll address one rumor. I don't think it's the most spoilerific thing in the movie, so if you don't want to hear anything potentially about a plot point that could be in the movie, skip ahead a little bit. But the one thing I'd heard about for a pretty long time with this movie is that they were pretty much more than likely going to end it with the idea that Rey goes to Tatooine, and someone asked her what her name is, and she says that her name is Rey Skywalker, even though it is not a part of the movie that she is revealed to be a Skywalker, so she just takes the name. Please don't do that. Just really do not do that. I really hope that is not in the movie. because I've seen that rumor for a good few months at this point, and most of the people I've heard talk about it don't like it either. So I hope that is something that they just thought about for a little bit and moved on from, because that does not work in any way. In terms of the criticisms that have been sort of leveled against Rey as a character and the way she's been written, that is the exact opposite of what you would want to do. Rey is interesting because she sort of stands out on her own as a character, because she's not necessarily linked into everyone else. Like, inevitably, I think they are going to reverse the whole idea of she's a nothing, and they'll reveal she's somehow related to someone. I'm not sure exactly what way they'll do it, but I've always preferred that just idea of the character of, like, you don't need to have her be the secret child of Luke or something like that, because it's kind of almost more interesting that she just is this randomer who ends up being this kind of very powerful Force user. And I think it would just do a little bit too much damage to her character to have to, you know, do that, especially if it is going to be like on Tatooine. And like, why does Rey have any need to go to Tatooine to potentially live? I don't know. Like, they've already, I think, overdone the whole thing of like she uses like Anakin's lightsaber, and I get that that's going to be like the main tool that like transitions across all the trilogies, but like it's been a bit overdone, just the keeping that and not having her have her own lightsaber. And that, like, I'm shocked that like we haven't heard as of yet any news that like she doesn't have like a saber staff, you know, a double-bladed lightsaber, given what the obvious setup from the movie seemed to be, that she doesn't have one. Like, as for other stuff, like Lando, like, he's never been like one of my favorite characters. It's going to be cool to see him, but like I'm not going to be freaking out when like Lando appears on screen. They seem to be setting up that 3PO is going to be doing something pretty big in this movie. That could be interesting, but it also could be more on the comical side of things. They're building it up to being more of a like massive moment based on the trailers I've seen, whereas like the impression I get is like, oh, this could end up being more of a kind of 3PO head swap in the droid factory type thing. But we'll see what exact way they do it. And then, yeah, like, this is gonna have to be the movie that has explanations, like, plot, and it's gonna have to have, like, everything. All of the plot. Because there's no setup for plot in this movie. Like, you take away the fact that, like, Palpatine is this sort of new addition into everything. If we didn't know about Palpatine, like, what's the plot going into this? It's literally just First Order versus Resistance. That's it. And I don't think there's enough there to do anything. So, like, they had to do something. I don't know if Palpatine was the option, but it was probably about one of the only things you could do, given what you did to Snoke. So I think what this movie has to do is it has to give a very good explanation about Palpatine, why he returns, how he survived, what the plan is, and what's going on here, his connection to this trilogy, basically, where the link in all of this is. I would hope somewhere along the line they explain what on earth Snoke was about, and if there's any connection there. That needs to be good and well done also. And other than that, like, I think that the main thing I'm invested in, that I actually like about the sequel trilogy, would be, I like Kylo's arc, the general idea of Kylo's arc, of the tease of the redemption and what way will they go about it. And the one thing Last Jedi did that I thought was good was the dynamic between Rey and Kylo, and I hope they build on that quite well over the course of this movie. You know, the whole romance thing is just kind of like, look, I don't mind too much if they lean into it actually being more of a romantic connection and stuff like that. That's not really that big of an issue to me, because ultimately, I don't think they were really going to go for like Finn and Rey, and like, if you want to have a romance in this, it makes sense to a degree, but you know, hopefully they do it well and don't have it look kind of silly, depending on what way the moments end up happening. And this is where Kylo's turn, which is inevitably probably going to happen, because I don't think they'll just have him commit to being a villain. Given that you're introducing Palpatine, I think you basically have revealed that Kylo is taking the good path to some sort of a redemption. That moment, what turns Kylo against the path that he's on right now, needs to be a very, very big moment. To me, that is probably one of your big moments where you should have Force Ghost Anakin. Force Ghost Anakin should appear before Kylo. Given his whole obsession with Vader, it would be so impactful for, like, a broken Kylo. I assume he'll be defeated by Rey in their fight somehow, and he'll be just left there. To just see the vision of Anakin, and just be talked to by Anakin, who knows that path, because like they've taken a similar path of just their fall to darkness and the path to redemption here. It would be so meaningful to have Hayden Christensen as a Force Ghost talk to Kylo and him get the perspective from the character who is Darth Vader. That Kylo in so many ways is focused on the Vader section of Anakin's life without forgetting that he did redeem himself in the end and save Luke. And I think Anakin is the character to remind him of that. I know there's been some teases of like, oh, is this where you might do some sort of a weird Force type thing, and with Han Solo, even though he doesn't have the Force, and how would you do that? I get the impact of wanting to do that, of like referring back to 7 and the fact that he killed Han, but Han doesn't have the Force, so you have to be very careful about how you go about doing that. In that you don't want to say that when you die you by default become one with the Force, because then it completely counteracts the importance of Qui-Gon learning the technique, teaching it to Yoda, the Clone Wars arc about it, Yoda, Obi-Wan learning it as well, and that technique being passed on as we go on. You don't want to just reveal that like anyone can come back as a Force ghost, even if they're not Force sensitive. So you definitely want an improvement on that side of the things. You'll notice I haven't really talked about Poe or Finn, and it's because, especially with Finn after The Last Jedi, I don't really have much faith that they're going to do anything with him, because he was such a big part of 7. Like, you were completely behind the character at the end of 7, and they just did nothing with him in 8. And I don't think they're going to do much with him here, because I don't know what his arc is. He can't follow Rey that closely on the path that she's going down. And that's always been like his big kind of connection to things, was the friendship with Rey. But I think they're leaning more into the Finn and Poe thing, their kind of friendship. So I think you'll just have to basically have those two be together with, I assume, Rose and these other characters, new characters that you're introducing. And with that, it's almost a case of like, I hope that too much of the movie isn't spent doing random resistance stuff, when it's the balance of the Force, it's the bigger picture that I think most people care about. That if like half of this movie is taken up with a bunch of just resistance stuff around like this faction that we know so little about going up against the First Order, a faction we again know so little about, and the return of Palpatine, how's that happen? We know so little about it. So lots of explanation needed to just get behind what the factions are in this movie. And so like I don't really think they're gonna like kill Poe or kill Finn or anything like that. So it all comes down to like, do they just end it with like Finn and Rose are a couple, and we just go on with the end that they do actually get together? Do they introduce a romance interest for Poe in one of the new characters, or what? I'm assuming we will, over the course of the movie, see something be said about like the death of Leia in some way, which again is going to be very interesting to see just exactly how much screen time Leia gets in this movie, given that I think they're constructing most of the scenes with Leia from not used shots from The Force Awakens. I think they kind of confirmed they weren't using anything from 8, because 8 didn't have much extra footage because it came together so well, apparently. But we'll see. So is Poe's thing just that like will end and he's going to be the leader of the resistance? Which gets into, I think, what is a pretty important point at the end of this movie. Like, I assume on that side of things we are going to see the defeat of the First Order and whatever remnants of the Empire pop back up, meaning that the Resistance is truly going to go back to being, you know, the victorious rebels. So we'll go back to being like the new Republic, and we can get the Republic back up on track. So does Poe just become a commander in the New Republic military in some way? I'm not sure. Because again, like, this trilogy just did an awful job at giving you any sense of just galactic politics and what's going on. Because, like, Hosnian Prime destroyed in Episode 7. It just seems like the government of the entire galaxy just crumbles at that point. And it's like 100 resistance fighters against the entire First Order, with no real sense about the exact scope of what the First Order is again. And, you know, I assume in the meantime the whole inspiration bit at the end of Last Jedi is going to mean we have much more resistance fighters on our side. But a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. Because I think the biggest thing about this is going to be, how do they end it? Because it has to be that sort of open-ended ending of, like, hope for the future. Basically the exact same as Episode 6. And it's always going to be this conflicting thing over, like, are you really just going to do the exact same story beats as of the end of Return of the Jedi, but with new characters? Is it just going to be, like, Luke ends Episode 6 as the Jedi Master. He's going to start a new Jedi Order. Great, let's see that. We didn't, and obviously it all happened off screen. Are they literally just doing the exact same thing with Rey? Rey's going to end this movie, Jedi Master Rey. She's going to plan to train more Jedi. Otherwise, like, what was The Last Jedi really about? So she has to take on that role again. But it's the last movie, so we're not going to see the formation of the new Jedi Order, at least in this material, or else we're going to be waiting a good few years for that movie. Again, I'm very unclear about, like, what the future of Star Wars as movies actually is. Because, like, obviously we're going to end this basically without really the Skywalker family around, and so what exactly are we doing? Are they going to in some way cover, like, this new era with Rey as the leader of the Jedi Order, the actual comeback of the Republic with everything truly once and for all for good defeated? And is that enough? Is it good enough to just repeat those exact same character arcs and do the exact same thing again, and rely on books and novels and comics to tell all the stories that the movies kind of should have? And that's where I'd be kind of like, yeah, I'd prefer the movie to take some risks with that sort of thing. Do something, like, different with Rey, and like, not just tease it going forward. Like almost show us her actually right there, end of the movie, training people straight away. Not that it's something she will do in the future, like with Luke. Commit to it, you know. Show us, you know, what the next step is, and, like, commit to this is this era that the books and stuff like that can now cover. We'll come back to it in movies and maybe a TV show whenever. Like, I think they do need to do some of that stuff. Because otherwise this movie could be super, super flat, and this movie could have you just asking the question of, like, did the sequel trilogy ever need to exist at all, given what you plan to do with it? Would it not have just been better to, you know, just take a completely different approach with what you were doing here? So that's most of how I'm feeling kind of heading into the movie tomorrow. In a way, I'm glad that it's kind of over tomorrow, because then we can just kind of get to just figuring out what's next for Star Wars. Like, Clone Wars is cool on the horizon. We've got some cool TV shows. The Mandalorian's great. It's going to continue. Star Wars video games seem like they're back on track. So it's not that Star Wars is just, like, done and over and stuff like that. But if this movie isn't that great, it is going to drastically affect Star Wars going forward, and that, like, it's going to be this huge failure of a movie, and that's never good to see. So I hope, you know, they've got some good plans going forward. But, you know, this is the same company who, you know, obviously hid Baby Yoda to give it a good, make it be a good surprise, but then didn't have the merchandise ready to go when people are freaking out. Now, ultimately, I think the hype probably will last, and that merchandise is going to sell really well when it does come out. But they were behind on that. They really did miss out, and not having that stuff ready for Christmas at all. But yeah. So yeah, like I said, I'll have a video tomorrow. It'll probably be relatively late in the day by the time I get back. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it on camera. I'll see how the light is at that time, because it gets dark so early here. So I might just have to do like an audio review type thing, with just a screenshot up on screen. So we'll see how it goes. Either way, I'll probably have at least 1 or 2 videos covering Rise of Skywalker and whatever happens. But yeah, that's been my video here. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are heading into Rise of Skywalker. What do you think is going to happen? What are the things you think the movie needs to do, doesn't need to do, and all that sort of stuff? Let me know. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.